Good morning and welcome to Monday, August 30th. We're almost through the end of the month, moving into September. Pumpkin spice is in the air, as I know so many people like that. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't know about you. What's your favorite flavor of the fall? That time is coming. Once we get after Labor Day, many people will officially think, okay, this is the fall. School has started, football's in the air. You've got Labor Day behind us. Obviously, this must be fall. Well, technically, it doesn't happen till later in September, but I know the feeling. And so, what's your favorite flavor of the fall? I'd like to see the comments in the side. I'm not a fan of the pumpkin spice, although it's not really pumpkin, so it's mostly spice. But anyway, that's just my personal opinion. Hey, welcome to Monday. It's a great day. Thank you for tuning in at whatever part of the day that you're tuning in. Thank you. Welcome to today's broadcast. I'm not really sure what I wanted to talk about today. I was reading in Chronicles this morning. It's always interesting to read through these times and places in biblical history. One of the things that struck me was David's preparation for the future. It's something that's on my mind all the time. The Big C Church, especially in the American West, here in the next 15 years or so, we will be losing the second largest generation in our country and the largest generation attending churches today. What are we going to do? How are we going to be? Are we going to be ready for that? And I'm not always sure that churches are going to be ready for that. And so these are discussions that we really need to have, but it's discussions that sometimes are hard to have. But David was proactive in his decision to prepare for the future. He there in at the end of Chronicles, and really First Chronicles 20 and 21, and then later on in First Chronicles 29, he's looking toward the future. He realizes that he had a part to play in the history of Israel, but Israel did not stop with him. He realized that Israel kept going, and he wanted to prepare for the better future, a more preferred future for Israel through the next generation. And so he provided for the next generation. Specifically, he was preparing for the temple to be built. Now, that was something he wanted to do, but it wasn't something he could accomplish. And it was also something he wanted to ensure happened in the future. And so he provided for that. He provided for it in a myriad of ways. Go back and read First Chronicles 20, 21, and 29. But the second thing that he did is he prayed for it. He was praying for the future. Now, sometimes we can pray for a future and it's more of a wish. I wish we didn't have this administration. I wish we didn't make these decisions. I wish, and our politics come into play, and that's not the point. Well, I pray for the future as long as it's exactly like I want, and that's really not the healthiest way to pray. We need to pray that God would be honored and glorified throughout the generations. We need to pray that his church would be powerful as an instrument and tool of light in the communities where they are planted, wherever those local churches are. We need to be praying for that. David prayed for the next generation. He prayed for his son, but he also passed on the authority and responsibility to the next generation. And he said, Solomon, this is up to you. This is for you to do. And so this is what needs to happen. And I just think through some of those things and realize, coupled with the message yesterday on forgiveness and apologies, that there are many things. We scratched the surface yesterday. But if we're going to pass down a heritage that is strong and healthy and ready, in whatever, maybe you're passing down a heritage at your work. Maybe you're passing that down to your kids or your grandchildren. Maybe it's at some other organization. I'm involved in choir boosters at the high school, and I'm president this year, but that doesn't happen next year. What are we going to do for next year? How are we going to prepare so that we have people in place next year? Well, I'll wait. We'll wait till April to figure that out. No, that's the 11th hour. That's too late. I can't wait until April to figure it out. We need to start laying the groundwork now to figure that out. So how are we going to, how is the church, how are they prepared for the future? And these are important discussions that we need to have. And David took proactive steps. And are we taking proactive steps personally? Are we taking proactive steps in our family? Are we taking proactive steps organizationally? These are important conversations to have. They're not a once and done. They're not a one-time thing. It's not an easy conclusion or decision or process. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes a lot of prayer for that to occur. But as we talked yesterday about forgiveness, we were scratching the surface. We looked at the big rocks, didn't we? We looked at what are the things that are coming to mind quickly, and people, places, events can come to mind very quickly that we need to forgive. Maybe they've hurt us, or we need to apologize to because we have hurt them. We may not know that. And unfortunately, sometimes we may not realize if we've hurt somebody. And in those cases, it could go unapologized for. I don't know if that's a word, but we'll make it up for today. I don't know. But we may not make apology because we are unaware of that we hurt them. And so we may have to have a conversation. You that have been hurt first need to forgive the person. But this may be something that, depending on the relationship that you have with them, you might want to address with them. Now, you got to be careful, and you got to be led by the Spirit to do so. But, my friends, there's a lot of deeper things that go on in our lives. There's a lot of other stuff that goes on that if left untreated, as I was talking to somebody yesterday about, and if we leave this stuff untreated, then it takes root in our lives. The Bible talks about a root of bitterness. Resentment can become a root of bitterness. How do I start to resent somebody? Well, I resent somebody if I haven't forgiven them. I can resent somebody because they got a position I wanted. I can resent my boss because they gave them the job and not me. I can resent the teacher because they gave them the opportunity and I didn't get that opportunity. I can resent life because I didn't get the education that I wanted and now I'm stuck. But my friends, there's a variety of ways that we can have our person didn't get elected. And so now we're mad, we're hateful, and we're angry, and we bleed all over Facebook with our negativity. I think there's a time and a place for us to share our opinions, and I rarely think that's on Facebook. And I think it's unfortunate that we fill our Sunday school classes and we fill our coffee shops with hate and anger and malice toward other people whom we don't really even know. We're just mad because it's not what we wanted. And I think that we need to have a level of forgiveness in our hearts and our lives because we don't want resentment to become bitterness, and we don't want bitterness to take root in our hearts and lives, because it just makes a wedge between us and God. It harms the relationship between us and God, and we lose our joy, and we don't even know it. We don't know when we lost. I can't tell you, when was I last joyful, and sometimes it becomes that in our lives. I just want to encourage you today, take time to forgive. Take time to let the Spirit of God move through your heart and find those places of resentment or bitterness. I actually heard somebody tell another person in church the other day, I'm done with you. Really? You're done with them. That's not an appropriate response in any capacity to another believer. They're your brother. They're your sister. How can you be done with them? I just think that we live so often angry at the world and angry at how life has dealt us some bad deed, or angry at things that didn't go our way, that it's become resentment, and that resentment has become bitterness, and that bitterness breaks relationships that you have. I think it's important that when we come together, that we have safe places to share our pains and our problems. But sometimes the pains and problems we have are of our own making, and maybe it's just the resentment and bitterness in our lives that we need to release to God and confess to God and seek forgiveness, or give forgiveness in our hearts and lives. It's in a deeper level. Sometimes it's easy to lay things at the altar because it's the big rocks. It's all the big things, and those are the ones that are easy to see. And oh yes, that person, it's the big one. But what about all the sludge that's left in your life that just slows your life down and just fills all those nooks and crannies and just weighs down on you over time? This is this cleansing that we need. Some of this cleansing can only happen in relationship with God, and can only happen when we release ourselves before God. Jeremiah had a fire in his bones. He had to say something, but David had another fire in his bones. It was a consuming fire, and he agonized because he had not released these things out of his life, and he agonized over them. I'm not sure when the last time was that we as Christians, specifically in the West, have agonized over our sin, or agonized over our lack of forgiving. Oh, I forgave Susie. Oh, I forgave Charlie. Have you forgiven the election last year? Because I don't think many of you have. Have we forgiven these issues? Or do we still want to keep it on the forefront of everybody's mind about how mad we are? What does that do to the gospel? When we spew anger and hatred everywhere about all things, and we're just mad at life and the world, I think that lessens the impact of the gospel. So many people are seeking a relationship with God, even if they don't know they are. There's a God-shaped hole, as we've heard it said in our lives, in everybody's life. And only God can fill that hole, that void in their life. And if we, the church, if we as the Christians are seen with anger and hatred and conspiracy theories galore and all this other stuff, it's just creating a sludge in our society. And they are looking and going, I'm mad at the world, and boy, that Christian sure is mad at the world too. So obviously Jesus doesn't mean anything to them. It hasn't changed their life. So I'm going to go seek Buddha, or I'm going to go seek Shintoism, or I'm going to seek Taoism, or I'm going to go seek some other spiritual level that seems to bring peace to people. Oh, but you don't understand our No, I do. I do understand. I'm just more concerned about Jesus and the gospel than who sits in the White House or the senatorial seat or the representative seat at the local, state, or national levels. I'm more interested in somebody having a life-transforming moment because of the power of the gospel that they first saw in our lives and then realized in their own life by faith than I am many, many other things. It's the priority. It's what we're called to do, to love our neighbor as ourselves, to make disciples of the world. That's the call. Loving people so they move forward on life's journey. It has to begin in us because we're the example and we're the model. And forgiveness and resentment and bitterness in so many ways, it's the next step from the sermon yesterday. Won't you take that step with me? Let's continue to walk, and let's lay things on the proverbial altar before God. Maybe you need to take a few moments this morning, or whenever it is that you're listening to this. Take a moment before God and maybe just ask him this question. Ask the Holy Spirit, reveal to me the areas that I hold resentment or bitterness or anger. Because God, I don't want the sludge in my life, and I want to be sure to shed the light of you to the world around me. Take a moment this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whatever it is that you have a moment, and maybe seek the Lord in this matter and ask him, help me, so that I can have the joy of my salvation restored and I can have the light shining through me, unfiltered and unadulterated. You guys have a great